Welcome to On the Bauble podcast, episode 24. I'm your host, Sabasajay Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today we're going to talk about the spoilers that we saw at Calling Indianapolis, and we're also going to be talking about the results of that tournament as well, and any other general things that...
general thoughts about the metagame and where it might go from here as we have the Calling Auckland coming up in 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
I think it's in 2 weeks. I think
2 weeks.
It was mid-February.
Yeah, I think it's February 24th. Actually, I know it's February 24th.
Okay, so it's in 2 weeks. Let's go. Before we do that, how was your week, Yuki?
I feel like I've been so negative lately, but this week was really not great. I've been sick all weekend. I'm actually still sick, but I'm back at work, thankfully. I missed the first day of class because I was just coughing way too much. I'm mostly better, but just like not 100%, have like a bit of a lingering cough. So that's been not very fun. Just been like pretty bored at home, laying in bed a lot. Luckily, I could watch all of the Calling Indianapolis, so that kind of worked out nicely. But yeah, between that and report cards, it hasn't been a very exciting time for me. It's kind of all I've been doing is sleeping and report cards. So
that sounds awful.
it's not great. I'm really glad, but like on the upside, I'm glad that I'm like, now that I'm getting better and report cards were done, I guess yesterday, I just feel like it's just such a relief. Like I'm just looking forward to doing anything again. So I'm pretty excited about that. So
That's great. That's great.
How's your week been, Jay?
For Flesh and Blood, I've played went to one event, which was 2 drafts. We did a Uprising draft and a WTR draft. For Uprising, I ended up drafting Icelander, and I went 2-1. I lost to a Dromai because he played out a Dracona Optimi, and on the last turn, he flipped over 3 reds on it, and I couldn't block it out, so I lost. If he flips 2 reds, I actually survive and kill him on the swing back.
Oh, that's pretty good. I got demolished the one time my opponent resolved Dracona Optimi. Although it was on turn 2. Like I went first and then he resolved Dracona Optimi, so maybe that's part of why I lost.
Optimi was on the board for like 4 turns against me.
Wow. I'm amazed that you survived that long.
First turn, didn't flip any reds. Second turn, only 1 red. And then one of the turns, I horned it so that it couldn't attack.
Ooh, yes.
And then on the fourth one,
and
on the fourth one, I'm just like, please, just not 3 reds. And 3 reds came up and I lost.
I'm still surprised you lasted that long. It attacks for 6. 6 is a lot.
Yeah, but you can give them frostbites and hit them and,
it's true.
force their hands.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, but and then in the it wasn't WTR, it was ARC, because I was on Kano.
Oh, how'd that
go? In my second pack, I ended up opening Plunder Run, red, and I couldn't help myself, so I ended up drafting it. And
so you have Plunder Run Kano?
And I open. So at this point, I have no attack actions that I've drafted, and I have this broken Kano deck coming together. And by the end of the draft, I learned I was the only Kano in the pod, so I could have just had like this broken Kano deck if I just didn't play Plunder Run. But it's Plunder Run. Like, when can you play Plunder Run again?
Very good. What kind of attacks were you playing with your Plunder Run?
So pack 3, I finally found attack actions. I found a red Vigor Rush.
Okay.
And I was playing a red Rifting, is it called? The 2 for 6?
Yeah, Rifting makes sense. Rifting makes a lot of sense.
So I was playing those 2 attacks.
So for our listeners, should you draft Plunder Run Kano? Is it a new archetype that's being discovered, or is there a reason that we haven't seen it before? Or I haven't, at least.
I actually went 2-0 and then lost the last round against Ian because he had what is that card called? I don't even know what the card is called, but it's the dash equipment that gives
Induction
Arcane
Chamber?
Barrier. No, it's
Arcane Barrier. Aether Sink.
He actually did have Induction Chamber, but he started the Aether Sink instead.
Oh, interesting.
I lose because of that. And
Mm.
also because I had Plunder Run in my deck.
Did you hit it off the top?
No, I didn't. But then there was this really awkward turn where I had to block with it. I was like, if it was a 3 block, I win the game. Or literally anything else. And if all my attacks were just 3 blocks or red burn spells, I would have also won.
Hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah, so fully punished. But I did get to do one of the games against Azalea, which had AB3. I got to pitch stack perfectly, so I got to go on a turn where I went Plunder Run, Vigor Rush into a spell, and then
Ooh.
I pitch stacked like double KO'd, Aether Flare, red card. I don't remember the exact sequencing, but I did like ridiculous amounts of damage in the last 2 turns of the game.
Sounds pretty spicy. I'm into it. All right, Plunder Run Kano. Don't know if I recommend it for our listeners, but if you're wanting to play something spicy, why not? Sounds fun.
Oh, it was stressful because you're just like you Arsenal Plunder Run and you're like, okay, how many cards have I pitched? Okay, have I seen a Vigor Rush yet? Can I pitch stack a Vigor Rush? No, yes.
Fair enough. Um, on that note, do you want to move into the spoilers and the calling?
Oh yeah, let's do that. So let's start off with the generic tokens, or yeah, they're all generic, right?
Yeah, I believe so. So they kind of did something that I don't think we've really seen before. They put all the spoilers up at different booths at the calling. I think they were at like artist booths and probably some other places as well. I think like some of the stores had it. Like I think MinMax had some spoiler cards out, which was kind of cool. So it gave like people like incentive to go around, see the booths, see the new cards. So I don't know. I just thought that was like a nice touch for spoilers that they haven't really done before, and I hope they do it again. It seemed pretty. I don't know how successful it was at the event, but I like the idea of it at least.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Like I didn't even know there was gonna be spoilers at the event, and just halfway through the day, people were like randomly posting up these new outsiders cards, and I was like, and people started talking about it a lot on Discord.
Yeah, definitely a really cool way to get like the whole community engaged and kind of what was going on. Um, so yeah, why don't we talk about the tokens? So we know that there's sort of like the three ailments or like illnesses in the pits, and each of these are represented by a token. And we got to learn what each of those do. So the first one is they're all generic token auras, and the first one is called Blood Rot Pox. This one says at the beginning of your end phase, destroy Blood Rot Pox, and it deals 2 damage to you unless you pay 3. I should also note that all the effects that we've seen give your opponent these tokens, much like a frostbite. So you'll give your opponent this, and at the end of their turn, they'll take 2, or they'll pay 3 resources. What are your thoughts on Blood Rot Pox as a mechanic?
This card's pretty disgusting. Like it's Icelander had to set up Frost Hex and then a Frostbite for them to deal 1 damage at the end of the opponent's turn. And Bloodroot Pox just does 2 damage, or costs 3 to prevent. Not 2, 3 to prevent. It's like a full card.
Yeah. And that means they're spending their card to block for 2, which is just never where you want to be. Blocking for 2 feels bad. Like sometimes you have to do it, but it's not where you want to be. So I think that thinking of this card as pretty much 2 damage is probably a pretty good heuristic for it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the cards, we'll just straight talk about Infect right now, which is an assassin attack action card. So each of these illnesses have a assassin attack action spoiled with it that on hit gives these illnesses. So the assassin attack action is a red line 043 that has stealth that we have no idea what stealth does. And it says when this hits a hero, create a Blood Rot Pox token.
Block 3, like I think all of the assassin attacks we've seen so far, pretty
Yeah,
much.
basically every assassin card blocks for 3.
So there's actually a cycle of these attacks, one that makes every single illness, but this particular one makes Blood Rot Pox. What do you think about this card? Is this a good card?
Infect, I think Infect itself is not that good of a card, but if your opponent is it wanting to block, this hits for 5. It's a 0 for 5. It's pretty strong. But it's essentially a 3 power attack that says on hit deal 2 damage.
Yeah. And so a lot of that's going to come down to, I think, what the stealth mechanic is. I assume that it's probably some kind of evasion that makes it more challenging to block. And depending on how good assassins are at making it hard to block this card, um, it could be pretty strong because 0 for 5 is above rate, but you do have to force it to hit, which is, not always easy. You can get a pretty clean 3 block on this card if you want to.
Yeah, we'll have to really see and wait until what stealth does to really evaluate these cards. So it's gonna be like a future episode thing. Let's move on. We'll talk about the next one of I don't know how to say this card's name. Frailty, frailty,
Frailty.
frailty, frailty. So this card does your attack action cards played from arsenal and weapon attacks have -1. At the beginning of your end phase, destroyed frailty. I got it.
Yeah. So this is always going to stop at least 1 damage if your opponent is attacking you with physical attacks, regardless of. Well, I guess not always. If they're attacking you with attacks from arsenal or a weapon. So if they're attacking you from hand, it doesn't do anything. But against classes that want to stop. That I want to attack with their weapon frequently, it's going to be a pretty reliable -1. And against Lexi and Rangers, it will be very consistently -1. I kind of wonder if stealth is going to have something to do with the arsenal, since we saw Codex of Frailty have to do with the arsenal, and I don't know, frailty on these stealth cards. It kind of like would make sense to me if there's like something to do with playing it from arsenal, and maybe there's like an interaction there, but total speculation. I could be completely wrong about that.
It might just be a limited thing too, where
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that Spider's Bite's gonna get reprinted as a token weapon,
Mm-hmm.
and that's gonna have 1 power. And we have Ranger in the set, so Ranger can typically only attack from the arsenal. So that's gonna stop 1 damage there as well.
I think fair to say that overall frailty as an on hit is going to be significantly worse than bloodpox. Bloodpox is pretty much always worth 2 because even if you're turning your opponent's card into a 2 block, like a blue into a 2 block, like that's pretty good for you. Whereas frailty, I think in most cases is going to be worth like 1, maybe on average ish.
No,
Like it can be worth more. It can definitely be worth more. Like in limited, it can be worth more. But I'm thinking in classic constructed, like
Frailty's a sideboard option, I'm pretty sure, for classic constructed with assassins. If you're playing
yeah,
against like Doranthea, giving your opponent a frailty token's insane.
it's
It
okay.
makes her blades so much easier to block. Like 1 less is quite a bit.
I guess so. Yeah,
And then if you're up against like Lexi, you just your opponent starts with 2 arsenal cards, and you're just like, I attack you with this card that gives you on hit frailty. Please give me at least 1 card in your hand.
that's fair. Yeah, I think it is fair that it could be a sideboard option. I'll be curious to see if assassins really prioritize this effect. It might depend a lot on what the metagame is, and I guess maybe not even just assassins, because we saw the Codex of Frailty as a ranger assassin card that can also apply this. So
Ooh,
there might be other things as well that apply it, but
that's
it does
true.
seem more narrow than Bloodrot Pox for sure.
You know what's really funny though? I think I don't actually want Blood Raw Pox in Assassin. Like in like what we have currently for Assassins, like I don't think Blood Raw Pox does what you want it what you want the current assassin decks to do, which is like to try and keep your health high enough so then you can try and rip cards late game. Yeah, Blood Raw Pox doesn't really do that of like controlling your opponent or like making their attacks worse, whereas Frailty actually does. Which Frailty is useless against some heroes, which is a problem. But like against exactly Lexian and Dory, like this on hit is relevant.
That's fair. I think you're right. I think that Bloodrot Pox doesn't fit into, I'd say, Arachne, at least what we know of as Arachne right now. I'm sure it could change, but right now, with what we know of Assassin, it doesn't fit in. I sort of wonder if that means Uzuri is going to be
Aggressive?
more aggressive, because a lot of these cards seem like Bloodrot Pox and some of the other cards seem kind of like aggressive leaning. Notably, Infect and this whole cycle of 3 for 0s don't have any contract on them. They don't banish cards, so I don't really.
Oh, I didn't even realize they don't have contract.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder if we're going to see like a totally different take on Assassin in this set. So it'll be interesting to see. We kind of need the context of the set to see, but yeah, I see your point that if you're on that kind of contract mill control deck, then Frailty probably fits in a lot better than Blood Red Pox does.
Oh, you have a good point. Yeah, that makes me thinking Azuri might be more aggressive leading because these cards don't have contract on them. Let's move on to the third and final curses. No, not curses. What are these called?
Illness,
Diseases.
ailment, disease. I don't know what their official name is.
The third one is called Inertia, and this card reads: at the beginning of your end phase, destroy Inertia, then put all cards from your hand and arsenal to the bottom of your deck.
This is the hit effect from Seek and Destroy, except that it goes on the bottom of the deck instead of discarding, which I guess makes it less relevant. Makes it less of a windmill slam for the more fatiguey assassin that's trying to deck your opponent. It doesn't get rid of cards, but it does stop them from setting up. We've actually seen Seek and Destroy be kind of like a staple for Ranger lately, especially in Azalea, who gets to play a few more generics. Just really relevant into Icelander and pretty good into Oldhim, and just in general, like if you can red in the ledger against an aggro deck, make it so they can only take one action and that red in ledger has dominate, and then you go ahead and take their arsenal. It's been really good. So I think we've seen this effect be like pretty relevant. And it's important to note that like it does happen before they draw up, so it's not just like it doesn't just take their entire hand, but it's pretty good against the right deck.
Yeah, it just cracks up their. Sorry, it just removes their arsenal. It's fine. It's a solid effect. I'm not exactly too sure if this illness is better than the other ones. I can't really see. It doesn't really give like actual value, because like some of the times your opponent has this, they just like use up their whole hand and they can play around it that way. So they need some kind of like either like infinite frostbites or, as you said, a red and ledger trigger for this aura to be even applicable, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's mostly in those spots, and then against. I'm pretty high on it just because we've seen Icelander and Oldhim be so popular. Cards almost always relevant against those heroes. They're not great at leveraging 5-card hands. They also, like Icelander really wants an arsenal a lot of the time. Like you don't always have to have it, but sometimes like forcing them to have to play out their arsenal when they might not want to can actually be pretty awkward for Icelander. And keeping Oldhim off of Crown of Seeds on the following turn can be, I think, pretty relevant as well. So
That's fair. That's fair.
definitely like needs some setup and isn't always good on its own, and maybe sort of similar to Frailty is it's going to be like a little matchup dependent.
What do you want to talk about next? You want to do Bonds of Ancestry or Quiver of Rustling Leaves?
What is Bonds of Ancestry?
Oh, you don't even know what Bonds of Ancestry does. Okay, let's go with that one first then. So Bonds of Ancestry is a red line 2 cost ninja attack action. It is a rare and it hits for 4, but it has the line combo. If a card with Gust Wave in its card name was the last attack on this combat chain, this costs 2 less to play, and has Go Again. And when this attacks, you may banish your card with combo from your graveyard. If you do, search your deck for a card with the same name, banish it, then shuffle. You may play it this combat chain.
Okay. I actually do know this card. I just forgot the name.
Oh, okay. This card is crazy.
It's pretty sweet. We do kind of need to see what comes after it, but I really like this space of sort of building on the surging Whelming Gust Wave, surging strike into Whelming Gust Wave line that has been a staple for Katsu and sort of saying, to me, what it sounds like is we're going to get other gust waves that probably can probably combo with Surging Strike, as well as something that comes after this. And that kind of feels like exactly what Katsu needs, because like you have the Surging Whelming line, and then once you're out of your reds, it's just like, what are we doing here? Like, the
The
other ones aren't
card
nearly as good.
the card that comes after this one has to be a mythic. Because if it's a rare or a common, it's gonna break limited.
That's fair.
Right? Because if
Yeah.
you go like if what you're saying is true, and let's say like Whelming Gust Wave and Surging Strikes in this set as well, you go Surging Strike, Whelming Gust Wave, Bonds of Ancestry, ban if the card after this is also a common, you get to just remove it from your graveyard, find it combo line for free.
I
That's
mean,
gross.
so to be fair, Whelming Gust Wave doesn't have to be in this set. They could just have a new Gust Wave card in this set, which I kind of think that they will. But
Oh, you don't think Whelming Gust Wave is not gonna be in this set at all?
well, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, the fact that they say card with the name Gust Wave kind of makes me think that they're going to have a card with Gust Wave in the name that is not Whelming Gust Wave. Because otherwise, they would just say Whelming Gust Wave, right? Probably.
Oh, I get you. I get you.
So, like, I guess they could put both of them in the set, but they also don't necessarily have to. They could just put whatever the new Gust Wave is, and it could also then, like, also work with Whelming.
Honestly, I'm pretty happy with this card though. It's just like it makes me want to play Katsu in Constructed again.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I feel like Katsu is a hero that kind of has gotten left behind, and honestly, I actually really liked Katsu early on. I thought he was a lot of fun, and Fi. I get that he's still a ninja and he still does the go wide thing, but I always felt that Katsu's mechanic of like putting your combo together and tutoring for your combo to be a little bit more up my alley than just the, I don't know, all your combo is draconic or something. It's just like
Yeah,
your draconic combos with your draconic, and it's like, okay, like it's just, I don't know. For me, it would just wasn't as interesting.
yeah. Well, if I not design wise, but like I think flavor wise, wanted to play like multiple Phoenix Flames,
Hmm.
where people were just like, I don't want to play Phoenix Flame in my deck, and then they ended up like not playing Phoenix Flames in their deck anymore. Like Phoenix Form, people don't play that card.
Yeah, you just kind of did the most consistent thing, which is fair.
Yeah, competitive. It makes sense.
I think that this attack will help a lot with the consistency, though. Just like having more redundancy off of that same combo line seems really positive for Katsu. So pretty
Yeah.
exciting.
But what's really gross about this card though is like even with just the current cards that are out, if you go pitch a blue, surging into Whelming Gust Wave, into bonds, you have one floating, so you can actually just banish a um just any one cost combo card and just play that. Like it doesn't actually have to combo with bonds. Like it can be any card with
Mm-hmm,
combo.
mm-hmm. You could even
So
get like a Fluster Fist and just do a 4 for 0 or something.
yes. Or oh yeah, I guess you can even do that with like Kodachi for one and Flusterfist or something. Wow.
Yeah, just as like the floor, I guess.
Yeah, it's just this is a 0 for 8.
Does it have to hit?
When this attacks, you may banish a card with combo.
That's really strong. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to hit. It's just like your opponent actually doesn't really want to block this card because this one doesn't have an on hit.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. Very cool.
Then the last card we want to talk about will be Quiver of Rustling Leaves. I'll leave this one up to you.
Yeah, so we have a new Ranger equipment quiver, which I know a lot of people have been like, Ranger, where's the quiver? We finally get one. So this is a majestic equipment. It doesn't have a block value, and it gives us a rules tech that says a quiver can be equipped in a weapon zone in addition to a bow, which makes a lot of sense, I think, flavor wise. And its ability is instant, 3 resources. That's the cost. You reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an arrow, put it face up into your arsenal and destroy Quiver of Rustling Leaves. So, notably, that destroy effect is part of the resolution and it's contingent on it being an arrow that goes in your arsenal. If you reveal not an arrow off the top. You did pitch a blue and not get any effect out of it, but you at least do not lose your quiver. Also worth noting, the card stays on top of your deck. So if you brick on the first one, you can't. You could try again, but it's just going to be the same card. It's kind of like when Kano hits an eye, you just can't do anything.
Oh, I see, I see. But same thing as Kano, you can activate this multiple times, no?
You can. So pretty cool because the card does go in face up. So if you are playing New Horizon, you can activate this, hold priority, activate this again, and potentially load 2 arrows into your arsenal, which is pretty strong, honestly. I think on first read, for a lot of people, this card might have been. It might seem a little bit underwhelming. You go, yeah, okay, like I miss an arrow, I gotta try going off the top, and it definitely has that use, which is not to be underrated on a free piece of like extra equipment that we just didn't previously get. But on top of that, I think it just does a lot for Ranger. It's really good with 3 of a kind because sometimes you just have extra cards that you can't actually use all your resources all the time. Like you don't know exactly what you're going to draw. Maybe you draw 2 blues and you don't need 2 blues, and just getting to try and cash that in for an extra attack is really strong. So it's kind of like it's very much like a bullseye bracers effect that can potentially be even worth 2 arrows if you can set up like a 3 of a kind from hand, 3 of a kind from arsenal. You could pretty reasonably get 2 arrows out of this quiver, which is a ton of damage and really, really powerful.
How do we get the go again, though, if we do that?
Yeah, that is part of the question. You could. So perch grapplers come to mind as a potential option. It's possible that we have a few arrows with go again, like Bolton Shot. If you have it on a Rain Razor's turn, we'll have go again. We do have Sikkim Shot, which is like not quite good enough, but I think if there was like a combo, if there was enough incentive to go into this kind of like many arrow combo ranger where you just need stuff with natural go again, like maybe you could play Sikkim Shot, but it's not quite there yet. So I don't know. It would be interesting to see if we get more arrows. Perch grapplers could also work in a pinch if you really wanted to set this up, although it's a lot of resources. Two quiver activations is 6, and then perch grapplers is 2, so that'd be 8 resources, which is a ton.
And you need to fire their arrows if they cost 1.
Yeah, I assume that if you're going for that build, you'd probably be playing a lot of 0 cost arrows. Ridge Rider Shot comes to mind as a pretty nice card in general now. It's just a 0 for 4 arrow that when it goes into your arsenal face up, you get to opt one. Playable in Azalea, not super exciting, but I think the potential to know that, hey, there's an arrow on top, I can just dump a blue and get an extra arrow attack at some point in the game out of your quiver is pretty strong.
Oh, I just realized if you didn't have an arsenal for whatever reason, with Azalea, you can now quiver to get the first arsenal card.
Yes, you can.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
There's actually a lot to talk about with this card. It works with Sandscour Greatbow. It's coming off the top of your deck, so it will get an aim counter. If you want to get really creative, there's some pretty good jank you can do with this card. You could potentially don't do this, but you could play Ragamuffin's Hat with it. That sounds terrible. What sounds maybe a little bit better with it though is Deja Vu Potion is like kind of interesting with this.
Wow, that's like going super Kano territory.
It really is, but like you could play like 1 Deja Vu Potion in your deck. I don't think it'd be that big of a deck building cost, and then like maybe against
Fatigue
like
Oldham.
a Fatigue Oldham, yeah, maybe getting those 2 extra arrow shots that you can set up of like a 3 of a kind into a 3 of a kind, and then you shoot 5 arrows with double Rain Razors or something. Like, I don't know, sounds kind of cool.
That actually sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, like it's pretty low cost, right? Like you're gonna play this quiver anyways, and you put 1 Deja Vu Potion in your sideboard. Like I could see it. I don't know if it's good enough, but maybe.
Wow, you almost sold me on it. I say almost.
I think regardless of like the cute stuff you can do with this card, it's just really good. It helps mitigate those like heavy blue hands, helps you use 3 of a kind, helps you not whiff on arrows. So
yeah, no, it's free.
Yeah, free permanent is pretty good.
Let's move on to the calling results. Where should we start? Let's talk about how many players showed up and what the metagame breakdown was for day one of the event first. So I'll just go into it. 491 players registered for the event. The most represented deck, as we predicted, was Briar. We had 79 entries. And then next was Dromai at 51 and 55s and 46 Dash players. Those are the four most represented decks. Um, any notable things you want to talk about here?
Um, yeah, Briar's not a surprise. I don't know if I is either. Losing Belittle hurts. I don't think the deck is terrible either, though, and a lot of people liked Fi, so I think like people sticking with that deck kind of makes sense to me, especially if you think, well, Ice got weaker, I also got weaker. Maybe it's about the same. I don't know. It doesn't surprise me to see a lot of Fi. Dromai is a little bit of surprise. I feel like she's been picking up steam, and I know that people have been excited about her, but going into, I don't know, Dromai's traditionally been not great into aggressive decks, outside of Dash, I suppose. And with Briar and Fi being heavily represented, I would have thought that you wouldn't want to be on Dromai, although I guess the Briar matchup is not terrible for you.
So there was actually surprisingly a higher number of Icelanders than I expected. We had 26 players registering Icelander. Coming right off the bands, it did end up looking like we're gonna talk about who won the event just a little bit later, but a lot of the really strong players ended up on Icelander this weekend.
Yeah, we saw some Icelander purists really sticking with the deck. Michael Hamilton, of course, and we also saw Majin Bay doing very well in Icelander, and I know he's been on that deck, I think, pretty much ever since Michael Hamilton won U.S. Nationals with it. So, yeah, some really dedicated Icelander players sticking to their guns, and I guess a bit of a spoiler, we'll talk more when we get there, but doing pretty well with the deck. That being said, the field was pretty wide. We also saw 30 Oldhim, so a little more than Icelander, but there was quite a bit of it. And then there was, I guess, 30 Reinhardt, 34 Lexi, 42 Dory, 42 Bravo. So all 8 of those heroes really wide, really represented. And then like a little bit of others, Viscera, Katsu, Kano, Bolton, Arachne, Azalea, Leviah, a smattering of those heroes. But those top 8 that we mentioned, um, pretty widely represented in the event.
Okay, let's just move on to day two breakdown. And so 105 players ended up day twoing the event. I'm not sure what record they needed. Do you know the record they needed to get to day two?
I believe it's usually XN2 or top 64,
Is greater.
whatever is greater. Yeah. So in this case, it would have been XN2.
Well, I guess we just talk about the highest conversion rates. So up top is Icelander. 13 Icelander made day two of the event. That's 50% conversion rate from day one, which is an insane number.
And perhaps I think people were like a little bit down on Icelander, ourselves included. Although right before the event, I did hear some prominent names saying, actually, Icelander is pretty good. I know Tarek Patel was tweeting about it a couple of days before, and I know Michael Hamilton actually posted their podcast episode kind of like late Friday night, I believe, and talked about exactly what he was playing, the cards that he was bringing in, and everything, and that he said, after doing some testing, we were wrong. Icelander is actually still great. So shout out to him for putting his deck list out there and still doing very well for himself at the event. He took down the whole event. I think most of our listeners probably know at this point, but Michael Hamilton won the Calling in Indianapolis, so congrats to Michael Hamilton. But we'll still talk about what the rest of the event.
So the next best performing deck was Azalea, had 40% conversion rate. Because there was only 5 Azaleas that registered day one and 2 of them made day two, it's we get this really high conversion rate. It's a little bit skewed data. If
Yeah.
one of them lost the last round of Swiss or something, if they were X and 2 already, this number could have been much lower. So it's not really like a reliable number to work with. But you know what? Congratulations. 2 azaleas in day 2, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, and shout out to Levi, who I know is rocking Azalea and is one of those Azaleas that made day 2. He's just I'm sure that that's in the Azalea chat knows Levi or Mabaya. He does a lot of Azalea guides and stuff like that, so it makes sense to see him doing well.
Yeah, the specialists making day 2s. Very good. And the other deck that did very well, we had looks like 12 Oldhams that made it through. The graphic that we're currently looking at is wrong, but I'm not even sure if I'm gonna post this up on YouTube. But yeah, there was 12 Oldhams making a 40% of the 40% of the Oldhams converting to day 2. What do you think about this?
I know that we kind of talked about Oldham not being great, and I had this kind of lurking feeling, especially like talking to some of the stronger Oldhams, where a lot of them were saying didn't actually lose that much, doesn't really matter. I think Oldham's still fine, and I was just like, oh, okay. So I'm not super surprised to see this after thinking about it for a little bit, but yeah, Oldham put out a really strong showing, and I think it kind of shows that as strong as Winter's Whale was, Guardian is just so fundamentally powerful. I think in particular, Icelander and Oldham just having these really powerful blue cards that you can still play and get good effects out of, and they block 3 is just, it's so good. You have so much consistency in your deck, and you really avoid so many of the other problems that all the other decks that are playing like 20 blues and a bunch of red cards fall into. So I think that that kind of design space is just proving to be super, super powerful. And time again, the cards that can play a ton of resource cards are really good. We actually saw the same thing with Prism, right? Prism was full of yellows, which fueled Luminaris and you're happy to pitch, and blues. A lot of the Prisms played like less than 10 red cards. So I think that that's kind of a formula going forward. Classes that are designed around this, I'm going to take a pretty close look at, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing about these Oldhams, there's two. Actually, I think all the Oldhams were on a spectrum, right? Where a lot of them were either super fatigue or super aggressive, and there was a lot of Oldhams in between.
And I think that's maybe Oldham's biggest strength in the metagame right now, is that when you sit down across from an Oldham, you don't know if you're on the super fatigue Oldham, which we've kind of talked about previous weeks with Warhorn, Remembrance, a whole bunch of life gain, which takes some pretty specialized tools to be able to beat. We'll talk about exactly how you can beat this deck a little bit, but yeah, you need like a very specialized sideboard plan to beat that. And then you also need to not just fold to the more aggressive Oldham that might be sitting across from you. So I think that having such like two polar opposite decks and not knowing which one you're playing against is it adds a lot of power to the hero.
Do you want to just talk about how you beat the fatigue Oldhams? I know there was a couple of what's it called, stream matches that really showed how Briar can destroy Oldham.
Yeah, so Briar's the main hero that has some really good ways to do this. Briar can pretty much play a normal Briar game plan and just loop either. I think on stream we saw Nathan Crawford piloting Briar. I believe it was Nathan. And he was running 2 Rites of Replenishment and just looping the fuse effect on them. So you fuse Rites of Replenishment. If you've fused it, you can put Elemental Attack on the bottom. So you put the other Rites of Replenishment to the bottom, and he just kept looping that. And he actually ended up decking out the Oldham player. So that's one way that Briar can go about it. And the other way is you can loop evergreens where when you play them from Arsenal, they go to the bottom. So I've heard some discussion about both of those. I don't have a strong opinion about which one's better, but I think both of them were represented in the tournament.
Yeah, I actually think that looping Rites of Replenishment is slightly better because you can actually have one of the rites in your graveyard and then start the loop, whereas the double evergreen, you need to either keep both in your deck, or if you only have one left, it gives the Oldham player one turn to attack you back, which then becomes a slight race issue if that if then that gives an Oldhim an out to basically rip cards out of your hand or to try and rip the Evergreen somewhere somehow. So I would recommend the Rights slightly better than the Evergreen.
That makes sense to me. And I know rights can also have the added effect of like if they're on the aggro build, it blocks 3, which you're probably much happier with, and it can also just bottom like an Enlightened Strike or something high value. So yeah, I think it has some pretty good
Which card?
uses. Enlightened Strike. Like if you end up playing both of them, you could like bottom an E strike with the first one, and then I think that's what Nathan ended up doing against the fatigue. He bottomed an E strike with the first one, then started looping them.
Oh, I see. I see what you mean now.
Don't
Anyone else?
don't put 2 E strikes on the bottom because then you break your loop.
Oh, is there anyone else you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I guess just kind of broad strokes, we see Phi and Lexi do pretty well for themselves, both at 26%. I think Lexi's not surprising with the strong aggro showing. I do think that Lexi's still going to have trouble into Oldhim, and I suspect that's why we didn't see any in top 8. But that being said, we did still see some Lexi's do pretty well. Dromai, I think a little underperforming at 15% conversion rate. Again, it's not too bad, but considering she was the second most represented deck and is now the 7th highest conversion rate, it's not a great showing for Dromai, and I think it makes sense with all the aggro in the field and also with Oldhim just having a whole bunch of poppers and having pretty clean answers to Dromai.
The big underperformers of this calling was Dash and Bravo and Reinar. Those three.
Yeah. To be fair, Dash does have a 13% conversion, so not that much lower than Dromai's, but definitely a bit of an underperform on Dash. Why do you think Dash has been underperforming? Because I know that both of us, you said that you would be on Dash, and you kind of talked me into Dash last week as well.
Yeah, I thought Dash would do a lot better. I still don't really see why Dash is this much worse than Briar or even Phi, honestly. If it was myself, I'm like pretty happy to be on Dash over Phi. I still don't see why Dash is this much worse than the other aggro decks. Maybe Dash really doesn't have a good plan into Fatigue Oldhim, and Briar just has a better game plan against it, which might be a big reason, as well as Dash isn't good into Dromai.
Dash does really struggle into Dromai. I think that's a big thing holding her back for sure. I wonder if the Briar matchup is good for you. I think Briar can pretty easily play Smashing Good Time if they want to. I haven't done enough testing of that matchup at all to know if that's a card worth sideboarding, but it would make sense to me if that's good in the matchup. And I wonder if Dash is kind of suffering from what she suffered at ProQuest season, where she's just pulled in a few too many directions. Like, you don't have enough D-reacts for the aggro Oldhim deck, while also having a full aggro package to race the aggro decks. And now if you want to beat Fatigue Oldhim as well, I think Dash does have a plan, but the plan involves having 3 Teklo Pounders in the list, and then you just put out a Teklo Pounder early to kind of buffer your items from the Warhorn, and then you just try and keep getting your Teklo Pounders. I'm not sure like how reliable that is. Like maybe you still deck out to the hammer, but yeah, in theory she does. I just wonder if there's just like too many different boxes that you need to check that require different cards, and she can't do them all well at the same time. Or maybe it's just one event, and I don't know. Not sure.
Or maybe we're just wrong about Dash. Maybe
Yeah.
Dash sucks.
Maybe she's a little overrated. But yeah, we see Reinhardt 6.7%, 2 of 30 making it, and we see Bravo at 2.4%, only 1 of 42 making it. Pretty rough for Bravo as well. For Bravo in particular, but Reinhardt too. I suspect really struggling into the Oldhams. Maybe other heroes as well. Briar's probably pretty bad for Bravo, I would have to think. Matchup hasn't been good before, and Bravo hasn't really gotten new tools.
I don't know why. I can't tell you why these two heroes are so much lower than everyone else. I don't. These two heroes in my mind, they don't feel that much worse than, let's say, like Katsu or Dori or even Viserai.
I agree. I think it might be I really think it might be the Briar matchup. Like Reinhardt just getting run over by aggro decks is not new, and Bravo just doesn't really have great tools for Briar. We actually saw that in the Briar meta where you just go way over the top with channel mount and you have all these 4 point attacks that have breakpoints, and then because Briar gets embodiments, like if you want to swing a crippling crush, Briar gets to have those embodiments for sure. And then if they have like a Sync in Arsenal plus a 4 block from hand, they can just like really cleanly block out your crush effects. And so I think my best guess is that Briar has been holding Bravo back.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Let's just move on to top 32 and top 8.
Yeah, so Levi, who played in the calling, posted the top 32. He said there was 8 Briars, 8 Oldhams, 5 Icelanders, 3 Dash, 3 Lexi, 2 Dromai, 2 Phi, and 1 Azalea. I know that Azalea is Levi, so congrats, top 32 with Azalea Levi. Pretty diverse top 32, honestly. Like, pretty much all of the major players represented. At least the ones that had good conversion rates, like Bravo and Reinar, not on there notably, but like Dash is there's 3 dashes out of the top 32, which is not awful. I know Matt Rogers was on the top tables for a little bit. He had a feature match as Dash, so
Maybe it's just like a function of like who was playing which decks, honestly.
could be. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But yeah, we do kind of see like Briar still represented, the Ice Heroes kind of pulling ahead relative to their early metagame share, and then everything else, like all the other big players, doing just pretty solid. On to top 8.
Yeah, just on to top 8. So top 8, we had 5 Oldhams, 2 Icelanders, and a Briar making top 8. Honestly, when I first saw this last week, I was surprised that there was 5 Oldhams.
Yeah, and I think this is what most people have seen from the calling, and at a glance it can look like, oh, we just had all the ice bands and ice is still here, and to some degree that's true, but I don't think it's the full picture. I think from what I've heard from players who played at the event, it wasn't like they were facing all Oldham and Icelander, although they did definitely rise to the top and overperform. As we see in the top 32, it's pretty diverse. But yeah, this top 8, a lot of Oldhams. I wonder if it just came down to kind of like, one final round and some of the way some of the matchups landed.
A lot of notable names I recognize in this top 8. We have Michael Jazz. I'm gonna call it Michael Jazz. I'm sorry, I can't say your last name.
Jazziker, I'm pretty sure.
Jazziker. Michael Hamilton on Icelander. Majin Bay on Icelander. I've seen the name Charles Dunn before. Tarek Patel. Those are the names I recognize. Do you know the other ones?
Oh, and Aaron Shantz. Also know Aaron Shantz, notable Canadian player. Ooh, I don't want to say who he tests with because I feel like I'm going to get it wrong, but I know that he's a notable Canadian player from Toronto area. And also Lucas Oswald. I don't know. So not a name that I've been super familiar with, but I do know that he is, I don't know his exact age, but I know that he is a younger player, and yeah, crushed it, top 8'd. So congrats to Lucas Oswald. That's awesome. It's good to see more of the younger players coming in and crushing it at events.
Yeah, great to see. Flesh and Blood's like average age is like way too high.
Yeah, so we have Brody doing well, and we have Lucas, who I think is even younger than Brody. So there's a few crushers out there.
Looks like in this event, just like all of these like people that I've heard the names of, or at least like know who they are. It's just, how do I say it? This game is ridiculous. Like the good players keep on winning in this game.
Yeah, the level of consistency that some of the strong players have is really remarkable when you compare it to other card games. And in particular, Michael Hamilton's resume at this point is just ridiculous. So shout out to Michael Hamilton. I know that there was this big discussion about who's the best player in Flesh and Blood. Is it, I think some of the popular ones right before Worlds were like Pablo Pintor, Michael Hamilton, Matt Rogers. Like everybody already was like, yeah, it's not a discussion as Michael Hamilton after he won US Nationals and Worlds, but now he just like, yeah, first calling that I go to, I'm just gonna win that one too. So yeah, pretty incredible.
I don't know if this information was true, but Michael Hamilton is pretty close to legendary status by himself, right? Like just himself. If you count all of his points, he's just like 700 LL or something.
Yeah, I think some people have done the math on it. I haven't personally, but I think it's something like that. Like he's gotten, yeah, just an absurd number of living legend points.
Yeah, like Michael Hamilton's like responsible for like almost all of Icelander's legendary status
Yeah, gave a ton from Worlds and US Nationals.
and this calling now.
One thing I do want to talk about is I know a lot of people have been concerned about the fatigue Oldham list running around. People don't seem to be a huge fan of the kind of play patterns that it has and playing against it and all of that. And I think that there's this like sentiment that I hear from some people that it was all fatigue Oldham everywhere in Indianapolis. And I don't know the entire event. I wasn't there, but at least within the top eight, we have deck lists, and that's simply not the case. We did see Charles Dunn, who was on stream twice, I believe, quarters and was it quarters? Maybe it was semis and finals on his fatigue Oldham list. And I think that's maybe why people are thinking that. But the other four Oldhams were all much more aggressive. I think most of them playing like Oakenold and Pummels and didn't even have Warhorn in the list. So
No, actually, most of them, actually, almost all of them didn't play Oakenold.
maybe two of them did.
It's the only person that has. Oh, sorry. So,
Michael Jaziker and Aaron Chance had essentially the same list. I believe that
oh,
they
okay,
tested
yeah.
together. I know they're
So,
both Canadian.
yeah. So those two had one copy of Oakenold in their deck. I don't know why. I don't know what this is for, but there's a single copy of Oakenold, and then Charles Dunn plays two Oakenolds. So I'm assuming they're for just for the mirror.
Yeah, that's likely the case. So, anyways, I think that going forward, you need to account for both Oldhams. You can expect to see fatigue Oldham, and you should have a plan to beat it. But you have to keep in mind, I think you're going to play against plenty of aggro Oldhams, and that archetype is still alive and well. And by aggressive Oldham, I just mean kind of like the standard Oldham that we were seeing before that kind of just hits you with big attacks and pummels and command and conquers, endless winter, that kind of thing. So yeah, you can still pretty much play a similar list and still do very, very well with it.
Yeah, that looks like a lot of different Oldham lists. You can literally play. Looks like you can just literally play any cards you want to play.
Yeah, just gotta have good sideboard plans. Shout out to Canadians. We have Aaron Chance, Tarek Patel, and Michael Jaziker, all from Canada, East Coast, all in the top eight. Pretty incredible. So good showing for Canada there. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, not really. That's all we
Cool.
have for today that I know of.
I know what we should talk about. So we mentioned it already, but in just over 2 weeks, we have the Calling Auckland. Where do you think the metagame is going to go from here? Keeping in mind that I think New Zealand does tend to have kind of like their own take on the metagame, and they don't always fully conform to the same metagame that we see in most other parts of the world. And they seem to really favor their decks that play a little more defensively, block a little bit more, play a little more of a methodical game.
That's a tough question. I think it just comes down to what the good players want to play. And I feel like this is like always been the case. Like in the NA side, mostly the United States, we really get an overrepresentation of like Icelander here just because we have Michael Hamilton that likes that deck. And we get a lot of Oldhams here because we just have a couple of really good Oldham players that always wants to play that. So we always see those kinds of heroes in the top eight. And New Zealand side, I'm not sure what decks they prefer. So I think it just depends on what the good players want to bring, and those decks end up rising to the top, essentially.
I wouldn't be surprised to see a decent amount of Oldham. I know Dennis Sang, who made the Fatigue Oldham list and kind of popularized it and won the ProQuest with it, is from New Zealand. So I do think we'll see a fair bit of Oldham. We also have Cale McCreath, Guardian Main, Matt Rogers. He played Dash at this calling, but he's played plenty of Oldham. Wouldn't be surprised to see him on that deck either. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there will be a lot of Guardian. I'm curious to see if anybody has anything to kind of break the meta open, but I also wouldn't be surprised to just see a whole bunch of Guardians. New Zealand does seem to like their Guardians. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of Oldhams, if anything, we might see a lot more Dromais. That might be a pretty cool. If like some of the Dromai players there can figure out that matchup, that might be a pretty cool deck to see rising to the top too.
Yeah, I don't know what to think about Dromai. I think the Oldham matchup is pretty tricky. The Fatigueless in particular they play a whole bunch of poppers anyways, because they just won all the 3 blocks. And then they can also just gain life and then swing their hammer at your dragons. So there is this like fatigue issue. But yeah, maybe someone can crack the code.
Yeah, we got to go
Dromai
back
does
to
seem
Iris of Reality.
It's true. Iris of Reality Dromai is probably very good into Fatigue Oldham. Yeah. Maybe that's the pick.
No, you just play both. You play Iris and the dragons.
Ooh, that seems hard. You need a lot of blues for Iris. Don't know if you can do both, but maybe there's a way. Maybe there's some.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a Dromai player. I'm not even close to one. I haven't sleeved up a dragon outside of draft yet. So
I don't think I have either. Actually, it's not true. I've sleeved up my Dromai deck. I was excited to play it, and then I got sick, so I haven't actually played it.
anything else you want to talk about?
So that's going to wrap up our show for this week. Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach out and ask us your questions in the comments down below on YouTube, or alternatively, you can get in touch with us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at YukiLeeBender, and you can find Jay at UedaJ, or you can email us at onthebauble@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your questions, feedback, or comments, and get in touch with us that way. Until next time.
Good night.
Yeah, until next time, have a good night. I'm trying. It's hard.